Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mary, and thanks to everyone at TMA for having me here today. Yeah, I've got some remarks prepared that cover a wide variety of these things. I think Dawn's presentation was very informative and echoes a lot of the trends that we're seeing at the shop level in the vapor side of the industry. And I want to address some of the problems that we're seeing with a lot of what Tom covered in his presentation and how that's affecting the retailers downstream, particularly in the vapor sector, which is really the only area I can speak to with expertise. But as I thought about how to concisely describe the regulatory impact that vaping has endured in recent months, I realized it's sometimes tough to summarize a catastrophe. It would be like asking the captain of the Hindenburg blimp which factor was the worst, the lightning, the explosion, or the gravity. The tragic reality here is that vaping is suffering through a multi-pronged attack from the executive branch, from Congress, and from self-perpetuating activist groups, also from the deep-pocketed donors that bankroll them. Each of those parties are being actively cheered on by an irresponsible news media that has cravenly ignored its public duty to treat issues of scientific importance and policy with balance and skepticism. The most recent assaults in this policy battle have been the FDA's sweeping market denial orders, the Postal Service ban on shipping vape products, and the gargantuan tax proposed on vaping products in Congress. From a business and retailing point of view, the results are just what you might expect. A slow implosion of the entire sector, collapse of investor and consumer confidence, and desperate efforts to seek a legal remedy. Stores are being shuttered, employees are being laid off, investments are being wiped out, and thousands of entrepreneurs and small business owners are watching their hard work and their dreams disintegrate. At the same time, there are very troubling signs of emerging gray and black markets. Again, this comes as no surprise. Black markets are the inevitable and entirely predictable result of this kind of draconian prohibition. Retailers and consumers are being driven to both disposables and synthetics. Sellers are trying to offload inventory in any rapid way they can. There are indications of products being falsely labeled as synthetic. Nearly all of those emerging products are manufactured abroad. There are now counterfeit suppliers of base synthetic from China that in reality is just tobacco-derived nicotine that is being falsely labeled. All those dynamics are bad already and nearly certain to get worse. But looking at this in terms of macro trends or purely empirical measures misses a crucial dimension. I want to emphasize what this all means in human terms in the consequences for ordinary Americans. Over the past several months, I've heard from countless customers who are utterly panicked about seeing vaping stripped away from them. These are decent, law-abiding Americans from all backgrounds who rely on vaping products in a valiant effort to quit smoking. Many of them are low and middle income, and they live on fixed budgets. Lots of them are recovering from smoking-related illnesses, and every last one of them is now living under a cloud of dread that they or their loved ones will be corralled back to smoking cigarettes. But you won't read their stories in the New York Times, they don't get interviewed by NPR, no one invites them to testify on Capitol Hill, the NGOs have open contempt for vapors, and the bureaucrats in Washington obviously could not care less if folks like that are left out in the cold. By every estimate, that's more than 15 million of our fellow Americans. However, we don't know the precise figure because the Center for Disease Control intentionally excludes that crucial measurement from its tobacco survey. That is horribly negligent, so I want to say it again. The exact number of Americans that are quitting smoking by vaping is the single most important statistic in this public health discussion, and yet federal health authorities are willfully refusing to examine it. There has been almost zero political accountability for these disastrous policies, but those millions of vapers are also voters, so I'm hopeful that they will soon be taking those officials to the electoral woodshed. But beyond the political reckoning, there is a more important factor, and that's moral accountability. What the FDA and the prohibition activists are doing is unethical. It is flat wrong by any moral compass and plain common sense. Last week, a study sponsored by the NIH showed that the vaping tax alone would drive more than 2.5 million people who have quit smoking back to cigarettes. The FDA and its leadership, like Mr. Zeller, know that. Members of Congress that are pushing this tax know that. After all, it's their own colleagues warning them. The FDA also surely knows that its denial orders will undoubtedly have the same widespread effect. This is not some academic puzzle. It's plain as day to anyone who's watched this space. The FDA, prohibitionists in Congress, and egomaniacal activists like Michael Bloomberg are pushing policy outcomes that have a straight and direct correlation to millions of people returning to cigarettes. They are directly and personally responsible. There have been other moral panics in this country and other boneheaded prohibition policies that wreaked public havoc, and we look back on those in our national memory with rightful outrage. That's why someday the public figures who drove this latest misguided crusade deserve to be remembered in disgrace. The public health harm, the individual medical suffering, the economic destruction, and the shattered hopes, all of this is correctly laid at the doorstep of FDA and all of those who worked so obstinately for these policies. At a time when smoking rates were plummeting, they took actions to make it increase. When the single most effective smoking cessation method of all time was devised, they tried to crush it. When American entrepreneurs innovated an entirely new business sector to facilitate quitting, they strangled it. As evidence piled up by the bushel that vaping was vastly safer than smoking, they instead misled the public and explicitly aimed to frighten them. And even as their colleagues in the United Kingdom are actively helping its people use vaping to quit, our public health leaders are casting our own people into the wilderness and calling them outlaws. I'm sure you can sense my own outrage at the state of affairs in nicotine policy, and I hope that you share it. My group, the American Vapor Manufacturers Association, and our many members have tried in good faith to take part in public policy discussions and responsible regulation. We spent countless time and scarce finances to embark through FDA's steeplechase approval process, which turns out to have been rigged from the very start, as recent fatal flaw memos have shown. But there's more at stake here than market shares and empirical business trends. Real people are having their lives and their health upended. We find ourselves at a policy crossroads where Americans are free to purchase and use flavored alcohol, cigarettes and cigars in abundant variety, countless types of marijuana, opioids, and sedatives, although all of those products cause widespread injury and death. And yet nicotine vaping, which in the whole of medical literature has not caused a single death, is being outlawed. When our freedom and individual autonomy is taken from us, and with a hypocrisy that is brazen, it is a violation that ought to offend us all. And what I would say on that furthermore is that one of the things that's been really sad to see, I own 6 vape retail outlets myself. I started my business as a former smoker who was very passionate to quit and help other people in my community quit. The situation that we're seeing now between shipping bans, denial orders, taxes, what's happening, people who started these businesses with a very specific agenda to help smokers get off cigarettes are now being forced to sell all manner of things just to keep the doors open. Some of those are things that are very helpful to other types of tobacco users, like oral pouches. I think that's something that a lot of vape shops are starting to carry. And that's something that is in line with what we're trying to do with vaping, is help people get on a less harmful product. But now you see people starting to carry cannabis accessories, hookah accessories, all sorts of things. There's been a huge rise in disposables, which I don't think accomplishes any of the goals that FDA, Congress, any of these NGOs want to attain. When you make it impossible for someone to do business in a legitimate category, you drive them to do business in other ways. And that's been the main theme that I've seen over the last half year. I don't think vape shops and vape retail is going away. Vape shops and vape retail is adapting. And some of it has been for the better, and some of it has been out of necessity. But as everyone says, I would say watch this space, because certainly there is a lot going on in the small business sector right now.